welcome Simon.
Hello, everybody.
Great to have you here.
Thanks.
And in our invitation, we have already stated a little bit about you and your background, and that you are a musician, composer, and arranger, which is quite a whole lot of qualifications together. And I would like to learn a little bit. Yeah, let's probably start where everything started. I find it quite interesting and exciting. You raised up in Russia, and what about that background, that time? When did you start getting into music?
Yes, hello, everybody. First of all, well, it's an interesting topic right now, talking about Russia. Well, I was born in Russia to Russian Jewish immigrants, parents who moved to Germany when I was a kid, and I'm coming from a very musical background, and my father's a jazz drummer, and my mom is a music teacher and choir conductor and pianist. So at least that's what she studied, conducting and piano. So I was lucky enough to have all kinds of music in the household. You know, we're listening from Tchaikovsky to, Duke Ellington and Michael Jackson and whatever. All kinds of cool stuff that I was influenced by.
So you got it into the milk.
Exactly. I had a basic Russian upbringing. Almost every Russian kid back then used to play some kind of instrument, along with regular education, So.
Music education were big at that time in Russia.
It was very big. I mean, I think it still is, So.
Or was it probably the community and the neighborhood where you were?
It was more of I think there wasn't much to do. We didn't have computers, so we had to kind of entertain ourselves. But because I was coming up, because I was in a household of musicians, everybody played something. So my parents were like, at least for the educational, they didn't want me to become a musician, for sure not, because it's a tough business, and it's really hard to be a professional musician. And my father was like, always knew that I should do something else.
You should do something serious. It's fun when you have a jazz drummer as a father, and he would tell you, "Kid, do something serious in your life."
You become something normal. Yeah, whatever. I started piano. I started violin first for a year, but it didn't work out for me because it took, everyone who plays violin knows that it takes a lot of time to learn, even to hold the violin properly in order to produce any kind of pleasant tone on this instrument. So it took me a while and I hated it. So, I switched to piano quickly, and and then, it took me a couple of years to learn to play as well. So I did. I finished the music school alongside.
Did you start more with
classical? Yeah, I started regular classical education in school alongside normal school. After school. I went to the music school, and I did an 8-year program, music school program. When I was we talking even pre-teenage age. Well, not pre, but from 4 to 12 or to 13 or something. So it started pretty early, And I was doing this and trying to leave a normal life, but my parents were really strict. My mom especially, so I couldn't go out before I played Bach or whatever I had to play, and prepare for the next session with the teacher for the next lesson. And that's it.
So basically, your mom was your piano teacher.
Behind it, yeah. My mom was very much behind it, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was pushing me like to, I think it's a good thing, but now I actually hated it when I was a kid, but now I'm really grateful that they pushed me to do it, because
at least she didn't make you stop making music, obviously.
Yes. I always liked to bang the piano and to explore. I was always trying to explore like different things on the piano. That was always my thing, to come up with melodies and.
You were more experimental rather than playing notes, playing scores, and literature.
Yeah, I was so much interested in my own way of like doing things, So yeah, that's how it all started, and then then I stopped playing piano for a long time, and in my teenage years, I was so obsessed because first of all, I was obsessed with girls. Yeah, well, I have to say, I thought, and I had a pretty nice voice. So because I was always singing along the records that I liked, I was into soul music, because my father used to listen to a lot of Stevie Wonder, and all that stuff. And I was like, man, it would be so cool if I could like sing and play. And, I was with 13, 14, I started to pick up stuff by ear. And, that's how I just kind of like got into the soul situation. And,
so did you do any kind of professional music education in terms of, did you study arrangement, did you study an instrument, or did you study composition, or are you completely self-taught?
Well, I think I am completely self-taught, like everyone else. Actually, now I understand who actually studied, because you always like self-taught. You always learn by yourself, actually. But sometimes I was guided by really good people, but I never had. Unfortunately, I didn't graduate any high school in a traditional sense. I went for a while here in Cologne in Germany to the high school, and the concept was not for me. It just didn't work out for me. I didn't want to be put in the box, and I was lucky enough because I was raised in a family, where music education was like on a high level. So I could have a lot of good teachers along the way, like Bill Dobbins, for instance, one of the greatest arrangers of our time and educators. I had a couple of private lessons with him when I started to do arranging, but way late in my career, when I was like mid-20s, I don't know, 22, 23 or something. So still young, but
later in your career, 23.
That sounds kind of like, yeah, well, and that's how it's just developed. I developed myself as an artist because I didn't want to I started with the piano lessons, and then I started with vocal lessons when I was like 15. I started to sing in gospel choirs. I started to do a lot of practicing with my voice and learning how to properly sing because I wanted to sing, And I also quickly understood, growing up in Germany, with the musical taste that I have, it was very Americanized. I knew that it's going to be really hard for me to find somebody who would be able to support me musically, who would be interested in it. Because when I was a kid, everybody, like, the music was not, people were not much in the type of music that I'm doing, the soul and R&B and this kind of music. So I understood that I have to learn stuff myself if I want to express myself, if I want to be an artist, And that's how it developed. I played by ear. I started to learn more about jazz, transcribe stuff, learn to improvise, learn the harmony, because I was always into the harmony, you know. And then there came a time when I was like, man, I need to, like, if I want to express myself, I need to learn how to write. You know, how I'm going to do this, because nobody's going to write for me. You know, I don't have the money. So I started to find people, you know, who would be interested in writing with me, professionals who like the way I sang. And, you know, it all developed like this. And eventually I started to I was doing a lot of gigs by that time. At 17, I started to do gigs as a singer for different clubs around Cologne and in this area here.
So you came to Germany with your parents and at what age?
12.
Ah, okay, yeah.
And it was pretty good at the piano, I have to say, but I hated it, so I didn't touch it for maybe like a year or two or something. But I knew I knew the grammar, you know. I knew how to speak the language, the musical language already. So, you know, in theory at least. Although I was the worst side reader, like I still am. I hate it.
But this is very interesting, because I mean, as an arranger, you definitely need to write scores.
Yes.
And I mean, particularly for big bands, it's quite a whole lot of scores to write. I know that because I as you know, I played also in the German youth orchestra, jazz orchestra. And so I didn't arrange for that. That was not in the realms of my qualification. But I knew how much work it was to handwrite all the scores. We had a great composer and writer and an arranger for that orchestra. At that time was Niels Jessinger. I don't know if you know him. Yeah. So how did you enter into the world of writing for other people or arranging for other people? It's like quite a journey from being an artist to get paid for producing arrangements.
Well, one thing I have to say about it, you're absolutely right about the writing and the technical part about it. It's very important, and there are, I think, far more routine people than me at writing specifically. It's a different process. But I think the key or the essence of the arranging, or of someone who wants to be a good arranger, is having ideas, good ideas, strong ideas, having a good understanding of how to make a song pretty. So this is very important, and not be in the way of an artist, to support the artist, right? So I clearly understood that this is definitely one of my talents, or like the biggest talent that I have. I have a lot of ideas, like always. And when I was like 20 or 22, I was writing, I was having like all these ideas, and I was started producing a lot of songs for people, programming the strings on top of that, and, you know, experimenting with sounds and doing all that stuff. And I was always fascinated with strings, of course. When I was a kid, I loved listening to a lot of strings. I was obsessed with it. I saw myself. I was like standing in front of a mirror, and I thought I'm maybe like a conductor. I saw myself as a Shostakovich, like doing some symphony. Pretty crazy. I was into that experimental stuff, into the stuff that takes you on a journey, music. And I was expanding my mind, like, by listening to this kind of stuff, you know, like, you know, also the old stuff, the stuff that my father listened to, like the Duke Ellingtons and whatnot, you know.
Did you analyze big band arrangements and other kinds of arrangements, string arrangements? So, I mean, if you would ask me, oh, Friedemann, could you write a big band arrangement? I would say, oh my gosh, It's you need to know for all the different instruments in the big band, which are could be 30 instruments or even more sometimes. The exact range and register where they are kind of, and I know. I mean, I wouldn't say I have no clue about arrangement. I had when I studied music, I had to cover arrangement courses, etc. It was interesting, but didn't make me become a good arranger. So I at least know there are different schools for how to arrange things, etc. And I wonder if this has influenced you, or if it was really like an intuitive way to dig your way through that. Because, I mean, when you write for the German Corps Orchestra, and you get paid for that, they must be able to play it and have some fun with that. Otherwise, they wouldn't get back to you. So I assume you're doing a good job on that.
Yeah, I assume too. I don't know. Of course, a lot of it is intuitive. A lot of it came along the way when I started. It all started by accident, to be honest. You know, I had a deal. I had a pretty solid deal in Russia as a producer with Universal Record. I had several deals in my life for writing and producing for artists, and I always added up my stringy arrangements to this pop songs that I used to do that I liked, and to different cool pop songs, and that I had a chance to work on for several artists that released some of their stuff, like in Russia or internationally, whoever I worked with. And eventually I got a chance to work with one of my favorite arrangers by the name of Philip Lassiter. He's the trumpet player and the main arranger, MD of Prince's band.
Wow, yeah.
Generation. So he does like 90% of arrangements in America for pop, R&B, soul, funk music. So he's amazing. And he eventually heard my arrangements for the first time. It was like 10 years ago. And so, man, there aren't too many arrangers think like that. You know, I was like, man, thanks, but I'm not really, I wasn't into arranging really, you know. So I kind of got into it like by accident, you know. And I learned also, that's when I started to really to learn scores. You know, I have a lot of scores, like in the back. Unfortunately, you can see it right now. I have books of all kinds of scores that I love. And I studied the instrumentation. I was learning it by doing it. You know, the best way to learn something, an instrument, for instance, or anything, is just by playing it or by doing it. And so I didn't pressure myself. I didn't go and I didn't get too much into the theory. And I started to work with a notation guy, with a notist, with a guy who usually writes for orchestras, a friend of mine, Joel, and he helped me to correct some of my ideas, to translate some instruments when I wasn't sure how to write for certain, like tubas, for instance, right? It's a very specific instrument, but I always had a very intuitive, proper understanding of the instrumentation, you know, of how to write for the instruments that I write for, specific strings and horns, you know, because I had it, like I listened to it. My father and I, we discussed a lot of this stuff because he used to be a professor at Moscow's Gnesinsky University. Is like one of the main universities in Russia, and he used to be a teacher there, a professor for rhythm and drums, but he's quite educated. So I had people to reference sometimes, like to reference me and to check on me, and I'm still not really the greatest notist, because, like I said, I think it's another process, knowing how to arrange and knowing how to notate the stuff.
Yeah, I think
Straight it properly.
it's a different area in the brain.
Yes.
So the creativity is on the one side, and this scoring kind of stuff is probably on the other side of the brain. And sometimes for me as a guitar player, I was never a really good side reader. I could do side reading for big band stuff, like the comping, like the rhythmic stuff and the chords, etc. But if there would be, it's I couldn't read that fluently. It's was impossible for me. I needed to learn that and memorize that. And on the other hand, I was always the guy with more bowls than the guys who could do perfect side reading. And yeah, so probably this is very, very good for you to have a freer approach to this instead of having a very technical logical approach to arrangement. So like simply hearing stuff. And on the other hand, I think it's very, very helpful that you grew up with so much music and a wide portfolio of music, not only classic music, also jazz music, which kind of ingrains you know intuitively what is working and what not. So this is very, very helpful when you are confronted with a whole lot of music in the household when you grew up. Yeah.
Yes, and also I have to say that, of course, over the years working with a lot of artists, especially with gospel artists, I do a lot of gospel. I work with a lot of gospel artists in the past, like maybe some of you will know people like Kirk Franklin and B. Slade, Fred Hammond, whatnot. Well, Fred Hammond, I didn't get a chance personally to work with, unfortunately, yet. But my friend Philip Lassiter do a lot of different arrangements for a lot of gospel artists, horn arrangements, and I get to, over the years, I got to help him a lot with a lot of string arrangements and adding some of my sauce to his arrangements. And it's all intuitive, but over the years I learned I have certain certain workflows, certain mechanical workflows that I always tend to go to, not to, because it's important to have some kind of knowledge, because otherwise intuitively it wouldn't work. It would take a lot of time. It would take a lot of time to get it done. You really need to have your tools, your harmonic knowledge, know how to move from one chord to another, know how the compositional, how this world of arranging works. It's a parallel world. It's not a horizontal world, because a lot of piano players tend to think horizontally, melody based, and the arranging is more vertical, because you write voice by voice. Perhaps not. You don't play as a piano player. You don't arrange as, you don't push chords. It's like, so it has to be idiomatic. The writing for instruments like horns and strings. So it's a parallel writing.
Interesting. Yeah.
You think horizontally. You think as a whole picture, but you write, parallel. So this is very important. That's where a lot of young arrangers do a lot of mistakes, or people who don't know. And when I started, because I'm a singer, and when I build a choir, I also know that I have to sing voice by voice, and I have to connect those voices in a way. They have to be connected, and they still have their own life and their own melody. So the voice leading is also key, you know. And if you know this, and this was something that I was always interested in, and I was spending a lot of time practicing it, voice leading, especially going from one place to another, so that your voices are all independent, and that's important for an arranger.
So to avoid too much parallel movements.
Well, parallel movements are good. Why? Well, I wouldn't avoid them. It's good. It just has to be idiomatic. It's like you cannot write for strings like push a chord and be like, well, this is how I want it. So, because sometimes, or on horns, like you cannot play any line because, you know, because of the bone players. They have a long way to play certain notes. You know, you need to have space. You need to understand how instruments work. So
yeah, definitely.
And yeah, so that's basically how I was just learning by doing, actually, asking a lot of people, contacting a lot of people. I'm friends, or not friends, but we text a lot on Instagram with one of the probably greatest arrangers of our time, who worked on the best records ever, like Frank Sinatra.
Oh wow, yeah.
Oh, his name is Alan. Well, see, now I'm getting old, man. What's his yeah. So, anyways, his name is.
Yeah, I also have my memory things. It's Corona. Yeah. I always say it's Corona, so don't mind.
No, I always ask people for an advice if I don't know something. You know, I had a lot of good people who helped me to like sometimes analyze some of my scores, and yeah.
Yeah, I wonder. So you did something for Jarreau, which was that? I would be curious.
Jarreau wasn't more. It wasn't an arrangement or something. I had a pleasure to sing with him. We did it like sort of a tour, and he used to record with an artist that I used to work with in Russia. She's a pretty known artist, and she took him to this concert, and we did a concert. I was like probably 23 or something. That was my first experience meeting like a real childhood hero. So,
well, yeah,
we were in the studio for a while, and he was recording an album with her, and I was kind of like in the studio trying to adding some engineering, some beats, some whatever, whatnot. So that was like my first. It wasn't really that wasn't my arranging side. It wasn't me arranging. It was me just like basically being in the studio and just doing some adding sauce. Like that's what I also do. I program a lot of like beats, and you know, I always was into that. This is another part of me. I come from hip hop, so I program a lot and do a lot of beats and all kinds of stuff. I was into that a long time. That's what I basically did on this new Candy Dulfer's record, on this new song.
I loved the video you have produced to show off your work about that. It's it looks so easy, but I can see the huge amount of work in such a video to present this evolution of the song in such a way. Beautiful.
Yeah. Yes. So I'm not really. I don't like. Well, I was lucky enough to be a part of Bundeswehr Big Band, to be able to write for the German Military Corps of Big Band. And I also have tremendous help by my friend Dietmar. He also writes a lot of arrangements for them, and he helps me to orchestrate certain things because he knows the big band very well, and the abilities, and how, he kind of like helps me with the score, and to score it out. But main thing about, I think, the reason why a lot of people tend to ask me to help them with arrangements, with mostly string arrangements, is because of the ideas, because the ideas are cool, and I pour my soul out with some creativeness.
Yeah, that's great.
It's just regular stuff, I always try to be interesting in my arrangements. I try to add like some character to the song. I guess this is like my thing.
Yeah, well, yeah, I know that you have developed a special technique to let strings sound supernatural. So even if you use kind of sample strings.
Well, no, not only. Yes, I use mostly synthesis modeling. So there's a little company, because most of the guys maybe know who work with strings, or some might know. It's a small, well, actually not that small of a company anymore. They are more known now. But I'm working with this libraries, not libraries, with this plugins for about, like, I don't know, 8 years or something. And it's called SWAM, audio modeling, and they created, synthesis. It's called modeling synthesis based, kind of like sample library, not library, but like I said, plugin, based on one sample, I think, and you can model it with to your liking, with the help of this little guy here, the breath controller, and by manipulating the sound of this one particular sample, by changing pitch, vibrato depth, and so on and so forth in real time, by pressing knobs, and it takes a while to kind of like learn it, but it's the most. I mean, there are a lot of great libraries out there right now, Spitfire and Berlin Strings and whatnot, and Vienna. But the problem about those strings is that they all recorded in one room, and they have one character, and they have the room, and you cannot really manipulate. And once you start manipulating them, they don't sound that good to my ear, And the great thing about this synthesis, about this samples, this SWAM instruments, is that you have a complete freedom to manipulate it the way you want to manipulate them, and sound, different, sound be more, more like more individual, like, not typical like Spitfire library and BBC library and whatever they call. So, I mean, you get great results with both. Don't get me wrong, but for most of the stuff that I do, and it's very experimental, and it's very, let's say, they're moving a lot. So I have a lot of movement in my strings, a lot of counterpoint in my strings. So I need to have the freedom to play them fast. And this is also like always the problem with the sample libraries, that once you start playing the strings, legato strings, in a fast mode, like quick passages, it tends to sound very
washy,
and not really authentic, So that is the main reason why I use SWAM instruments. think they're great for that, for playability especially. You know.
Yes. Yeah, I think this expression aspect is quite important to have this breath control and these other controls to add some real feeling to it, because it's human. So probably the violin, I don't know, doesn't sound as natural by the sound alone, but by ingesting this kind of expression things from a real human being, they get alive in another way, which probably is more convincing, or
Absolutely, because the difficulty about this library is that you really need to have some engineering skills, and that's what we're here. That's a good place now to talk about the engineering. You need to have a certain amount of engineering skills to know how to manipulate the sound. You know, I'm also working with a lot of EQs. You know, subtractive EQs, and then subtractive EQs again to reduce the artifacts of whatever comes from this EQ that I use and before. And I create a real orchestra situation in my program in Logic. So the thing with the not with the sample strings is that other than in the real world, when you have like a real orchestra, every player needs to play as a, well, it needs to work that everybody has to play the same, kind of try to play the same, but nobody actually play the same. Everyone has a different approach to an instrument, different vibrato, different, you know, it's the same with a big band. They all sound different. They have a different tone. So that's the main goal in the virtual world. You need to try to make them sound as different as possible because the samples sound the same.
Yes.
So every line that I record, every string line has a different different curves, different automation curves for expression, for vibrato, for depth, for pitch. Because nobody really, except for the first violin, nobody has a perfect like pitch in the orchestra, perhaps. You know? Yes. Everyone's off, and no one plays on one, so everyone's a little behind. So this is like additional technique that I have on my template that I use. It all adds to the main picture. So this is how I tend to work. It's a little tedious, but once you have your way, it goes really quick, you know. So yeah, that's how I work.
Yes.
And it pays off because it sounds better. It sounds definitely better than samples to my ear.
Yeah,
because I get different songs from different artists, like my friend who I write a lot of strings for, Bobby Sparks, is the keyboard of Snarky Puppy, famous jazz group. Mm-hmm. And he released his second record, and I do a lot of arranging for him and writing as well. When he sends me a track, it always sounds different, which is great. It has a different vibe to it, and if you use a sample, you're only limited to one sound, and then sometimes the sound doesn't fit to the whole thing. You know, sometimes you need to really adjust it to your strings to the track. So that's what the swam instruments allow me to do, because they dry. You don't have no, you know, and that's the most important thing about them, because I can have my own room, you know.
Yeah, which is super important. This annoys me often with libraries, that they
very
yes. It's psychoacoustically difficult, because you have this whole lot of different room things which would come together and supposed to sound like unified, like a whole big instrument together, but it can because they come along with different rooms, etc.
Absolutely. In these rooms, as soon as you start building up, because most of these libraries, unfortunately, are not built for guys who create 5-part harmonies. I have a lot of, because I'm coming from this jazzier background, my harmonies are always very rich, and I have a lot of movement in the inner voicings, you know. So when you have that much of a room on the strings, it's very hard to define this sound that I have, you know. So, but like I said, I mean, these are great. I can show you real quick. This is a normal sound. It's when you just play it, nothing comes. But when I create a sound like this, so I'm creating a really very naturally great sound, and it's a performance. You know, I can perform it really. You know.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So this time it came through a little bit better because the Zoom ducking tries to act against it a little bit. Anyways, sorry guys, at this point we have absolutely no idea why we have this latency here, because we have damn fast internet, we have 1 millisecond ping, and we have no damn clue what would create the latency here. We're gonna figure that out, but we can't do anything against that in this moment. So sorry for that. So I'm wondering, for example, the Candy Dulfer thing you did is more a recent thing. The sounds you would find on the record, are those sounds produced by you? With this technology, or have you delivered the arrangement and they had been re-performed by some artists?
No, we didn't. I didn't. This also all right. Also, the Candy Dulfer thing. The Candy Dulfer thing didn't happen. I didn't have any strings on it. Perhaps maybe like some disco stabs. But on this particular song, it was only one song that I wasn't involved with. It was produced by Nile Rogers originally. It still is produced by Nile Rogers. And I was just programming a lot of stuff to it. So what you hear on the record is a lot of my ideas and a lot of programming. So I changed the beat completely. I used my samples and my drums to make it to make it sound really hard and dance-ish kind of. And I used my sounds. I used my Behringer, but it's like a Moog, thing. And I used the smoke bass, 3 basses. I don't know if I could show you. I could show you the session actually, but I don't know how to, because of the latency. I think it's just, I don't know. It's going to be weird maybe. And I used a lot of sounds, a lot of the intro that at the beginning of the song. I used some of my samples based on Splice. I took some samples from Splice and I cutted them and I pitched them and I twisted them, and everything on the record is basically the way I did it at home. They sent me a track or a multi-track with the stuff that Nile Rogers produced, and I added sauce to it. I added it up. I made it.
Yeah, nice.
That's what I do a lot. this is also something that I do a lot for a lot of artists, in the States, especially for several recording artists. They send me some stuff and they just like to have the sauce, like have it a little thicker and clearer, It's kind of like what they want. Sometimes they want the engineer to do this, but I think it's not an engineer's job. I think it's a producer's job to make stuff sound fat. The engineer is supposed to just, place the fat sounds,
at the right spot.
At the right spot. That's it. So, but the programming and the engineering, the sound design part is what I like to do as well, and this is like a part of my income, is what I do. So this is basically what I did on Candy Dulfer's record, the programming and adding up like some ideas. Like this part that I posted, this was my idea, this was my bass, the way I heard, with this bass, and adding some sauce to it.
Yeah, so probably it's a good time to start with some questions of the guys here. So you please feel free to add other questions to the chat, so that we can I would read that. And was there a difference in working with Till Brönner and Johannes Oerding? What were those differences? It's a question of Thomas.
Hey, Thomas. Well, of course, musically it's different, but it wasn't. Perhaps in both situations, I rarely work with the artists themselves, with their producers a lot. For Johannes Oerding, it was an arrangement for a pop song for his producer, Mark Smith. Shout out to Mark Smith, an amazing producer and great musician, very talented musician. So he sent me a track, and he wanted me to add some strings to it, and for Johannes. And they were experimenting with some soulful sounds. So it was a very like pop. It was a pop song. It wasn't that involved harmonically. So but Till Brönner is a different thing. I mean, it's a jazz artist, and perhaps in this case, I've worked on a lot of different projects where he was involved with, when he played, and it was always different, especially for the military corps. I did a song that he played on, I think, a concert, a song that I arranged, and he played on it. So it was way before I knew that he's going to play on it, so there was no pressure. I wasn't thinking about it, So for me, it's like arranging a pop song or arranging like a jazz song. There's no difference. I don't really care, whoever it is for, as long as I can be creative, more or less, that's a good thing.
Mabu is interested in, if you mix your stuff on your own, what would you have on your mix bus?
That's a great question. What should I answer first? What is the the mix bus? Okay, I tend to. It really depends on what I'm working on. Right now, I have a session open that if I work on strings, I have. I don't think that I have much on the mix bus specifically for strings. I have a lot of group buses, and they have a lot of very little, very subtle stuff going on. But for instance, on this project that I'm working on right now, I process every group of strings several times. Every chair of strings, like first chair, second chair, third chair of the violins. I have a different processing. Mostly, I manipulate the room of each and every one with room plugins. There's a great room plugin. It's called EA Reverb. It allows me. It's not so. It doesn't take up too much CPU and ear reverb. That's the name. EA Reverb. And you can manipulate the position of the signal, of the room. Then I have, of course, my EQs. Then they go to a bus, and then there are EQs again, and I process. Subtract the artifacts that are created along the way. If I hear some artifacts, whatever, created by the subtractive EQ that I had before. Then on the main bus, I only have SSL bus because I have SSL channel on every channel, and then it goes into the SSL bus. So SSL bus, it sums up all the individual channels, and I have Satin. It's a tape machine. It's one of my favorite tape machines. It has a really nice manipulation over tape machine.
The Saturn 1 by FabFilter?
He Satin.
Oh, it's another one. Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
Then I have a basic limiter, and I limit just really, very subtle FabFilter. I love FabFilter. Everything FabFilter is EQs. I use FabFilter as well. I think they create the last when subtracting stuff, especially I get the last of artifacts and whatever. So it's my go-to stuff. And then of course I have that's my mixing bus. Mm-hmm. That's my bus. And everything goes out. It's a sub mix, and everything goes out on the main mix. And usually I get people send me a stereo file where I create my arrangements, whether horns or big band or strings. So it goes out on the main. Don't ask me why. It's just because then I can my submix I can adjust to the main bus, and maybe add some limiter on the main bus and add something if I'd like to when I present my music to the client, in order to make it sound good as a reference. So I might the main stereo bus.
I have also a question. So my question would be, how precise are your customers when they hire you to do an arrangement? So what would be a typical advice or guidance for you to know what they are looking for?
It depends. Most of the guys who hire me they already hired my work. So the typical thing would be, man, I heard your stuff that you did on this Frank McComb song. There's this Bobby Sparks song where Frank McComb is singing the strings you did. This is so crazy. This is what I want. This is exactly what I want. The song usually has nothing to do with that style. It's very different. So mostly they are not too many requirements. Sometimes sometimes people have a specific, they want, this famous gospel artist, B. Slade, he, last year I did an arrangement for him, and he asked me specifically for a very somber sound. He wanted a darker sound, and he was very specific about the sound. He was like, I really want this, and I don't want no virtuoso lines in it, but I want a darker mood in my song, because it's a very sad song, not sad, but it's a very somber kind of song, melancholic song. So I was thinking like what can create the sound. Usually lower strings, lower harmonies, and celli do this job very well. Celli sound really like a lot of celli, like 16 celli or something instead of just.
Yeah.
It's like, what if I just have them play harmonies, and I started to like. That's how I started to approach this arrangement. But most of the time, I have creative freedom, with the artists that I work with, because also they know. I mean, I say that I'm not just when I arrange, then it's also, it's not just layering chords and adding just simple stuff. It's also like creative most of the time. So people like that.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much, Simon. And probably at this occasion we both are actually thinking loudly about someday, sooner or later, doing a kind of arrangement seminar here with Mastering Academy with you, which would be gorgeous, would be wonderful. So we just need to figure out how to put it into a format, etc., and find some time for that. But I would love that, because I think what you are doing, this arrangement thing, is a very crucial part, and the mindset of taking care of the sound in the first place and not leave it to the mixing or mastering engineer. I mean, so that's basically tooting into the same horn as Dave Isaac in our last session, like really get a vision of what you want to do and make a statement by the choice and the recording at the very, very beginning of the whole journey.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Simon, for being with us, and thank you very much, guys, for being with us. And yeah, see you soon. So I would say goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
You guys. Bye.